Anyway, enough goofing off. All right. Welcome back to Arguing Semantics, and today we are talking about Morbius. Morbius follows the titular Michael Morbius, a world-famous scientist who, in trying to cure his own debilitating disease, splices his DNA with that of a vampire bat. In doing so, he manages to cure his disease and give himself superhuman abilities at the cost of a violent need to consume human blood. He now races to find a solution for his condition as the cops try to track him down and arrest him for murder, and a new terror is growing in the shadows. Man, Jared Leto cannot catch a break in the superhero universe. This movie was not good. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen, but it is real not good. It is aggressively mediocre at almost every turn. The cinematography is weak. The editing is awful. It overly relies on not good CGI. The performances are generally good, but they're lost on a poor script and bad shooting. It's like, yeah. So anyway, let's attack each one of those one by one, shall we? First and foremost, this movie is really badly edited. Visually, this movie is just not very fun to watch, purely from a visual standpoint. And it's for a lot of different reasons. I feel like the core issue comes down to how it was shot. This movie feels very, very haphazard for most of the movie. It uses a lot of really wide, flat visuals that don't really add anything and don't give the actors a lot of room to work with. So some of the more subtle acting in the movie just comes across as wooden, which I'll get into a little bit later. And I feel like a lot of that is cinematography. I feel like they were just shooting a bunch of stuff, and the edit is so haphazard and so weird because they didn't know what they were shooting as they were shooting it, and the editor was trying to work around the bad film that they had to work with. If that makes any sense, it really did not work. The editing caused a lot of pacing issues where there's a lot of the movie just blazes past anything interesting super quickly at various times throughout the movie. So the plot never really comes together. Not to mention the fact that the story has so many differing threads that it's following that the movie comes off as completely unfocused. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and none of it is handled in a way that feels earned or necessary. While there are some interesting kind of long shot segments, and it does use some really interesting dynamic filmmaking because they added this effect of this smoky trail behind all the characters as they're moving really quickly, and the sonar abilities that he has this kind of foggy, smoky texture to it. The visuals just end up becoming muddy, so they had to use these freeze frames to show you what's actually happening, but they didn't frame any of these very well, so it was just like, this is weird. Not to mention the fact that a lot of them relied on the really, really mediocre CG that they had throughout the film, which, let's just talk about the CG while we're at it. The biggest problem this movie had is that it committed the cardinal sin of superhero movies, and that is an over-reliance on CG to the point where when any of the characters are in vampire mode, they are a completely CG rendering of said character, which I do not understand at all. I guess they were trying to do these big over-the-top action sequences like a lot of movies do. They use these CGI character models for those, but then it was like, why use it for literally every point that character shows up in the movie? Yeah, not to mention the fact that the CGI models were bad and very badly animated. Like they moved robotically or like really rubbery at different times, and it just came off as goofy and weird and not really like scary like they were clearly going for. Then there was a whole bunch of other weird technical things in the movie. Like there were a lot of lines that were ADR'd after the fact. For those who don't know, ADR means automated dialogue replacement, and that's anytime that they go into a movie and replace the audio or whatever the person is saying with something else. Either they add in a different audio cue or they add in a completely different sentence. And there was a lot of that in this movie, along with there were some shots that felt like there was supposed to be an effect in them. Like it was shot for a moment and then they never added the effect. Specifically, there is a moment really early on where he gashes a guy in the throat, but then they don't show you the throat gash, but the shot is really like wide out on one side. Like you can tell there was supposed to be like this big blood splatter that just wasn't there. Like you hear him gargling and, falling over, but you don't see any blood, which also, it's a whole thing for a movie about a guy who needs to drink blood. It's a really bloodless movie. There is violence happening, in extreme violence in some cases, but the most you get is like a little bit of blood on the people's faces. It's really, really weird. It feels like they were trying to shoot it as a rated R movie and then tried to haphazardly force it into a PG-13 mold, but then went way too far in the other direction to the point where there's a lot of violence that comes in that feels underdone because there's no result of any of it. Yeah, it just felt like a movie that wanted to be more than one thing and failed at either of them. Now, the thing I will say is overall the performances were fine to good. They just felt like they weren't given enough to work with. Jared Leto in particular, and Matt Smith, who plays his foil in the movie, his best friend, which I'm just going to say right now, full spoilers, there's no need to go see this movie, so I'm just going to talk about all of it as I go. Jared Leto and Matt Smith, who plays his friend, who eventually becomes his enemy and the villain of the movie, both were good in what they were doing, but it felt like the entire movie that they weren't given enough to work with, or like there was a lot of their relationship that was on the cutting room floor. It felt like there were action scenes that were cut, or there was motivation for the characters that were cut, and so on and so forth. Jared Harris is in this movie, who's one of my favorite actors, and he is completely wasted. They give him almost nothing to do and then kill him near the end. And they give him some really weirdly 80-yard dialogue at the end, which was just really, really disappointing to see. Tyrese is in this movie, and they cast him as kind of a really gruff detective, but he brings nothing to the table. He's just kind of stoic and the entire movie like he's trying to be this gruff, stoic cop, but it just comes off as weird. He's not reacting to things that are happening in the scene in any kind of a realistic way. Like it was completely phoned in, felt like a paycheck performance. And then the love interest was kind of in between all of that. Like she wasn't bad, but she just didn't bring particularly anything to the movie. She was fine. I feel like she could be good in another role, but she didn't bring anything here that was particularly interesting. Story-wise, she eventually becomes the love interest, which was clear what they were building to, but they didn't do enough to fully earn it. Just eventually they're making out, and it was like, that didn't really work. Then there was a bunch of other weird stuff, like eventually in the movie he learns how to fly, but there's almost no explanation as to how he's learning how to fly. It just kind of happens. That, and there's also some, like, for a movie that is about a scientist, there's a lot of really bad science in the movie. Like, flat out, the way that vampire bats are described in this movie are not how vampire bats actually work in real life. It makes for a cool visual and some interesting stuff there, but it gets a lot of really, really basic things wrong, not to mention the fact that the main character has a disease he's trying to cure, but they never tell you what it is, how it works, or why this will cure his disease. It's really weird how little world building they did in this movie. All of that being said, there were some bright spots in the movie. For me personally, I thought Al Madrigal as the partner to Tyrese was actually a lot of fun. He was there to be the comic relief, but I feel like the jokes that he made were all pretty solid, not so over the top that you feel like it didn't make sense for that type of character to exist in this universe. And he seemed like the only person who knew the movie that he was in, or the type of character that he was supposed to be playing, outside of maybe Matt Smith. Matt Smith actually looked like he was really enjoying playing up his character throughout the movie, but Al Madrigal was good. There were some really solid jokes, one of them involving whether or not Jared Leto can go into sunlight, can touch sunlight. That was actually a pretty solid bit. Both me and my wife looked at each other and was like, okay, that was a good joke. And there were some genuinely creepy moments. There's a hallway sequence where a character's walking down the hallway and there's a figure running around the walls coming at them as lights pop on and off. That was really well done and really cool and generally creepy. And there were a few moments where they used the transformation to really good effect with subtle little changes, like their face will change just slightly. The sonar while it was kind of weird, overall was interesting and did work. I like what they did with his eyes. As I said, though, they used this weird, like, kind of smoky thing coming off of everything. That's how they showed a lot of the abilities of Morpheus working, which made for some interesting stuff at different points, but mostly just muddied the visuals. There was a lot of just smoke happening all the time, and that's how they just kind of explained away his abilities and what he saw and what he didn't. Or even, like, that's how they tried to explain how he could fly because he could see the air moving. The sonar did make for an interesting effect and a unique one, even if it ultimately didn't serve the movie on the whole. And the other thing is a lot of effects worked in very, very small doses. Like I said, the one thing I will say for using the CG for the transformations is that they could do small transformations, like just the character's face changing a little bit at different points, that made for some really cool moments where they're having a conversation. All of a sudden you just see the person's face change a little bit, and that worked really well. It was only when they went into the full transformations and it was all CG, and you were just like, why is this happening? How can this look this badly? Especially for a movie that I believe got canned for like a year and a half due to the pandemic. Yeah, it did have some high points, but overall, this movie really is just a mess. It really isn't worth your time. And on top of all of that, they're still trying to make Sinister Six happen. And it's not going to happen, Sony. Stop trying to make Sinister Six happen. The movie had 2 after-credit sequences, which mostly involved the fact that they moved Michael Keaton's Vulture from the MCU into this universe, which they do establish through a couple of references that this takes place in the same universe as Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage, which the interplay between those 2 universes just feels weird. I know that all of this is building into a multiverse thing with Sony, so the Sinister Six could end up being in the MCU stuff as well. But right now, Sony's trying to build its own little Spider-Man thing without Spider-Man, and it really is not working, and they just need to stop. Stop trying to make this happen. The next thing we've got is Aaron Taylor Johnson is going to be starring in Kraven the Hunter, which is like, we don't need this. No one wants this. Just stop. And so far, the first Venom was a little bit fun, but kind of a mess. The second movie was a lot of fun, but really a mess. And now Morbius it's just not good. It's really not good. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but big pass on this one. I'm really curious to see if they can salvage a connected universe after this. I don't think they can. They shot their shot, and I think it's going to be dead. But we'll see, depending on how well it does. But yeah. Anyway, that being said, my name is James. This has been Arguing Semantics.
Like and subscribe.